All right, welcome everyone to our second sharing with Rena Zampiron. And I am Dinah Mack. I'm the Education Program Manager with Massachusetts Farm to School. Thank you so much for joining us on a Wednesday evening for this presentation on gardening, school gardening with young ones, with young children. And I'm gonna be giving the floor to Rena. The chat is open for everyone to use. And please participate as you see fit. And Rena, I'm going to pin you so that you're starring in this video.
And is it the proper size now? Can you see it better, Dinah?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Excellent. And I actually have to say, apparently they've updated the system. I think I actually can flip between tabs right now. So I might actually be able to view chat. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. But why don't we try it right now before we really get started, and we'll give people a chance to join us. But in the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing a memory from your childhood where you discovered or learned something about growing plants or farming or gardening. And I'm curious to see what helped that lesson, that key that you learned, to kind of stick in your mind. Why is that something that stuck with you? So I'll give you a minute or two to toss that up in the chat. So Dinah shares that she remembers growing vegetables in New York City on a balcony. Wow, that's ambitious. Um, Planted veggies and excited by growing food. And it was your thing that you did together because no one else was interested. That's really sweet, Dinah. What a great memory. I think I may have shared this the last time with my last workshop, although it could have been a different one. But I remember when my grandfather was teaching me that you could tell when certain fruits were ripe because they had turned red. And he kind of tricked me. My grandfather was red-green colorblind, and he told me that he really needed my help to help him figure out which strawberries, which raspberries, which tomatoes had turned ripe because he couldn't see the difference between red and green. My grandfather had been a farmer at this point in time for probably at least 20 years. There's no way he didn't know how to tell a ripe fruit from an unripe fruit, but he definitely made me feel very helpful and important, that I could help him identify by color which ones had become ripe. Give us just another minute in case anyone else wants to put in. Caitlin shares, learning from your grandma which squash flowers were male versus female because you could pick the male ones to eat. Caitlin, you're going to have to tell me. I actually don't know. How do you tell a female squash flower from a male flower? I don't think I know that one. I'll let you answer that one. Claudia says, first memories of gardening, visiting your grandparents' house and watching them grow cucumbers. Amazed at how she was growing what you saw your parents buying from the store. Yeah, isn't it amazing when we learn where food actually comes from and what it looks like when it's whole, right? Things we're used to eating from cans, thinking about like, what does a pineapple actually look like? What does it feel like versus the ones we get in a can? Devin shares the day they learned about root vegetables and how they grow. Very cool. Carolyn shares expanding the flower garden, helping your dad build the walls with lumber. And it was important because it was a memory of being and working with your family. That's really special. Anita shares grew beanstalk with your grandmother from a bag of dried beans she had when making rice and beans. You're so young, you're not even sure what kind of bean it was. You know, it's pretty funny when you can take those like bags of mixed beans that you get for soup, right, at the grocery store, the dried ones, and a lot of them actually will sprout if you try to grow them. So thinking about how some of these are still, viable and you can actually still grow them. Wow, we're getting a bunch here now. Kelly shares, you had a small garden as a kid, but only 1 or 2 years. Remembered planting seeds and watching things grow. Suzanne's grandmother had a victory garden, learning that peas grew in pods. Yeah, right. If you're used to eating them already shelled, it's impressive to learn that they grow inside the pods. And sitting there and shelling them, watching the roots grow in the transparent containers, those are really neat. Caitlin shares, the male ones have the slender stem and the females have what look like a tiny zucchini under the flower. Well, there you go. Very cool, Caitlin. You just taught me something new there. Narissa says, remember your parents, a farmer that they planted rice, really? And your father taught you how to plant corn and vegetables. That is really cool. And it's neat how different crops, my grandfather was an apple farmer. So I learned a little bit about growing other things, but most of what he had to talk about was growing fruit trees, apples and cherries and pears. Tina says, always wanted to pick all of the blueberries. And your dad taught you it was worth it to pick just the right bright blue ones because they were so much sweeter, especially in pie. Really sweet, Tina. I love how in so many of these we're mentioning moments with family, right? And so I think a lot of these memories for us are so strong because they remind us of spending time with our family, especially if it was one on one. Having siblings, having cousins, you might not always have gotten a lot of individual time with just one special adult. And so sometimes that's what made it all the more meaningful for us that it was those special one-on-one moments. Yakiria shares, watching her mom take care of all her plants, especially her orchids in Puerto Rico. That is really neat. I know very little about growing orchids, but would love to learn more. Thank you all for sharing those incredible memories. All right, there we go. So, this is our Kids in the Garden workshop series. This is our second one. We call it KinderGarden. And today we're going to be focusing entirely on garden and farm based curriculum. So, how you can tie this into that classroom component on all of the different ways to learn. For those of you who didn't get my intro, my name is Rena Zampiron, and I am the statewide early education manager for Mass Audubon. So that's basically a fancy title for a two-part job. One is that I help to oversee and coordinate the efforts of all 7 of the Mass Audubon preschools that we have across the state. And then the other part of my job is working with early educators like yourselves to provide resources and training and support for helping you all to incorporate nature-based and garden-based learning in your programs. So I always have to start with my little Mass Audubon spiel. So Mass Audubon is the longest continually running Audubon society in the country. We are older than National Audubon, and we were formed by 2 women who wanted to put a stop to the fact that people were putting dead birds on their head and calling it fashion. So from the very beginning, there was a ton of work that they were doing around conservation and advocacy. But right from the start, these women were going into school systems, talking with children, and really building that education component. So, education is a huge part of the work that we do. Across the state, we have more than 60 wildlife sanctuaries. Of those, 21 of them have nature centers. So, that's actual buildings on site where we have staff and we do all kinds of educational programming from young families and very young children all the way up through elderly and everything in between. Among those, as I said, we have 7 nature preschools that run through the school year, serving, that number's a little inflated, about 200 children and families. And that's all the way from the western part of the state, all the way out to the Cape and the islands. Now, sometimes people ask us, why is Mass Audubon so dedicated to working in the field of early childhood? And it's because, like you, we realize that there is such an incredible ability to impact children's lives when you start when they were very, very young. The incredible benefits that young children get from spending time in nature in all of the different developmental domains. We want children from the very beginning to be able to build a strong personal connection to nature, learn about how nature and the natural world sustains them and what role they play in it, so that hopefully as adults and older children, they'll want to be involved in the natural world and helping to protect it and preserve it for future generations. Now, we accomplish this through a couple different areas, first being our own nature preschools. We also go into many preschool programs and offer nature-based programming so we can bring this to other schools. We work a lot with young families doing family-based programming. And then, of course, all of our incredible resources and trainings that we offer to early educators like yourselves. So I realize some of you may have been here last week, some of you may not. But I did hope that a few of us might be returning so that maybe you'd be willing to toss up in the chat, maybe just a quick one-liner. What did we do? Why did what we do feel important to you, and how you might use this in your work? So if you're willing to answer one of those questions or all three, that's awesome. I realize the forum's a little different doing this in the chat as opposed to speaking out loud, but would love a quick little review from anyone who wants to share what we did last week. Also sharing a last minute share from Sarah says that her grandmother let her spread the wildflower seeds at the beginning of summer vacation and watching them grow through the summer. That's really neat, Sarah. I attempted in the fall to plant a bunch of overwintering wildflowers in an area that was completely clear cut because we had to move some land. And I'm really hoping they come up. And I have absolutely no confidence whatsoever that I'm going to see any wildflowers, but my fingers are crossed. Maybe we'll pull that off. All right, so we're giving everyone a chance if they want to put in the chat, brief summary. What did we talk about last time? What was important about it, and how you might use it in your program? Oh, Lydia, you hit the nail on the head right there. I was hoping you would get that. So Lydia shared that we talked about the 3 domains for integrating farm and garden education. And that's literally what the next 3 workshops are going to be. We kind of did the intro last week, and now each of the following weeks will be a deep dive into one of those. So it was community, cafeteria, and classroom. So classroom is the curriculum piece, which is what we're doing today. So all the different ways that you can create activities and learning through farm and garden learning. Next week will be our cafeteria one. So different ways that we can taste and cook and eat with our children. And then the community piece will be some of that diversity and inclusion work and thinking about how we can access our greater preschool community to really enhance the learning experiences. So thank you, Lydia. Kelly shares that she really enjoyed getting to do designing our dream garden. So we did have a chance to envision what either our school garden or our personal gardens might look like if the sky was the limit and we could design it any way we wanted to kind of get us thinking about what are some things we're excited about when it comes to gardening. Carolyn shares, yes, those 3 C's, thinking about the ideal garden. And her biggest takeaway was that you booked a field trip for your homeschool group to the maple sugar farm. That is so amazing, Carolyn. I love that. You are right. We are entering into maple sugaring season here in New England. For me, it's always like that breath of fresh air, like, oh my gosh, we're almost at spring. Thank goodness. So really excited that that is kind of like the first farm crop that we grow around here in New England. And it is going to be happening anytime soon when our days are not quite so frigid as they have been lately. Thank you. Feel free to keep tossing things up in there and we will keep going. All right. So the way we're going to break down today's workshop is we're going to look at all the different developmental domains that occur in preschool curriculum, and we're literally going to share a bunch of ideas for each one of them. So we'll just go down the line. We're going to talk about some social and emotional activities, music, movement, and dramatic play activities, different ways to engage in art through garden work, language and literacy, math, science, and then fine and gross motor. And I will say, for those of you who weren't here last week, at the end of this workshop, I've already sent it out to Dinah and they will send it via email. But all the activities we talk about, as well as some other resources, will get emailed out to you. So if you're someone who likes to take notes, by all means, but don't feel like you have to jot down every word that I say, because all of these activities, you're going to get a written description of that. All right, so let's start with social and emotional learning and what are some ways in which working in the garden can support social and emotional growth. So one of the most simple ways to do that is by introducing sit spots. Sit spots are exactly what they sound like. You encourage kids to find a quiet, peaceful spot where they are comfortable sitting, and you start out really short, maybe just for 10 seconds or 30 seconds, where the kids just sit and enjoy their spot outside. Doesn't have to be at a garden, but lovely if you have a few planters or something that's growing. Um, and it's a really nice kind of meditative experience. If you make it part of your regular practice, like before we go inside, everyone go find their special sit spot. They may have one they use week after week. It becomes a special place for them and can actually be something children will seek out when they need to help emotionally regulate themselves. So if a child is feeling stressed out or overstimulated, they may start to go on their own, or you can suggest to them to go find their sit spot. But just a very nice way to kind of gather yourself, find a spot just for you. Oftentimes it's special because you start to notice changes over time. So a very peaceful sort of experience. On some of the social piece, gardens are very teamwork heavy, right? Together as a group, you might decide, what are we going to plant? How do we care for it? How do we harvest it? What do we want to do for eating it? How are we going to share this product? So, kind of building that community feel. And even if it's only a single planter that you have for your group, what do we want to plant in that? Or one raised bed? But trying to engage the children as a group as much as possible helps to kind of build that community feel. There's also, as a result of that teamwork aspect, a certain amount of classroom pride that comes when you know that that garden, that plant would not be here if not for us. If we hadn't planted it and watered it and weeded it and harvested it, we would not have this here. And so, having children get to have that sense of accomplishment that they cared for something and it produced for them is a very exciting moment. There's, tying in that sort of responsibility piece. I know many classrooms have a job chart, right, where children are assigned a job for the day. Well, taking care of the garden is definitely a job. And so maybe that's one child is assigned per day or per week, or you have a team, or maybe it's a whole classroom job. But that idea of we have a job to do, it needs to be done routinely. It's an important part of our day. It's something we're always expected to do, kind of builds some of that, reliability and responsibility in the children. And then, of course, you can, make your garden part of your daily ritual, whether that is, once a day you go outside, you go to visit the garden. Maybe you sing to it. Maybe you do a special ritual or a greeting. When I grew up, anytime my mom saw a baby plant growing, she would always encourage us together to say, "Come on, little plant, you can do it." And I know it sounds very silly, but like you really felt like you were cheering for the plant and that, it would make a difference. So those kinds of little moments there can have a pretty big impact. All right, so music, movement, and dramatic play. So many different ways that you can engage the children in all of these. Sound maps is an idea where you sit with the kids outside, maybe near your planter or near your garden bed if you have one. And, you just sit with the children and they either point to where they hear different sounds or they'll say what they hear or they count their sounds. And you'll make a little map, a little drawing where you put yourself in the center, classroom or teacher or whatever you want to put. And then you'll draw on the map, where did you hear the different sounds? Did you hear tweeting off to the upper left-hand corner? Did you hear trucks going on the road back by the parking lot? Did you hear the beeping of the, package truck as it was backing up? Did you hear crickets and was there wind rustling the leaves? Did you hear children screaming and playing? And what's interesting about the sound maps is you can do them on multiple days and notice how they change, right? It might be that in the fall, you hear a lot of bird songs, and maybe in the winter, you notice more the sound of, wind or the creaking of the trees. And then maybe in the spring, you hear the buzzing of insects. So it changes seasonally and with the weather, of course. So neat to kind of try that and see how things wind up changing over the time. Garden yoga. I will say I am not a yoga expert. I have not taken any yogi classes, but this doesn't have to be any official yoga positions, right? It's just basically giving children the chance to move and stretch their bodies in the way that different plants do. So, for example, we talked about bean plants. Bean plants like to twist and climb. So, I might have a yoga position where I have my arms all twisted up and maybe I cross my legs. If I'm going to be a pumpkin, I'm going to spread my big wide leaves out. If I'm going to be a tomato, I might have a big round fruit growing on the end of my tomato bush. So, thinking about how can we stretch and move like different plants might do that. Um, Veggie offs are a little bit silly, probably work better with slightly older children, 5-year-olds and up. But the basic idea is two kids are doing a face off, and you'll say either just, a vegetable or a fruit, or you might give them, a descriptive word to go with it. So you might do, sad eggplant, and the children just act like however they think a sad eggplant would act. Or you say, you know, funny green bean, and they have to act like that. And it's just playful, it's silly. The kids can, vote by round of applause which one they thought was a better representation of that vegetable. It's just a silly little playful game, but one that really gets kids involved. You can build a plant. We actually have a video we're going to watch in just a minute for that, and hopefully sound will translate well on that. But that's basically where you use the child and you put different parts onto them to build an actual plant and kind of talk about the different parts of a plant. There is soundscapes. Soundscapes are a way of adding both a nice peaceful sound to your garden. So kind of adding one of the senses into the garden for kids who want to sit peacefully and listen to things like wind chimes or bells. But it also has the added benefit that many soundscapes work as pest deterrents. A lot of animals will be frightened of unexpected noises. So, I might do this with a clothes hanger and some old keys that don't open any doors, and maybe some old screws. And I'll hang them. And as they, tinkle against each other, it makes a sound that the animals wouldn't like. We'll also talk about visual pest deterrent devices that can help with that. But that's a fun way to both protect the garden, but then also provide some nice sound background for the children. And then, of course, all kinds of songs and finger plays that you can do with the children, things like inch by inch, row by row, singing songs to the plants, making up songs for the plants, are just kind of different ways that you can, get the kids singing and moving and thinking about what it's like to be a part of the garden. All right, before we jump into this video, I just want to check to make sure we don't have any questions in here. It looks like we're still good over here in the chat. So I'm going to share this amazing video. This is Jed. Trying to remember his last name, but it escapes me at the moment. But he is an incredible educator from the Vermont Farm to School and Early Childhood Network. And here he is with his two sons, and he is going to show us how to dress a plant. And you'll notice as you go through this that he's not using any fancy equipment. All the pieces and parts that he has here are ones that are basic, art supplies that you would have lying around. So we'll play this. Dinah, please let me know
Hey,
if people
Rena.
can't hear sound. Yes.
Rena, if you turn off your video, your little box video, it'll stream better. And I will let you
Okay.
know if we can't hear it.
Perfect. Thank you. Sounds good. All right, here we go. Let's give this a try and see if it works.
Everybody, welcome to my house. This is my son Dylan, and we're going to be joined by my son Milo. They're going to both help me out with one of our favorite activities that we do at the farm, dress up a green bean. We have a whole bunch of other dress up kind of costumes. It's a really great way to invite kids to learn about the different parts of the plants, and we hope you enjoy it, and hopefully you'll get some good ideas from it. So Dylan, today we're going to dress you up like a green bean, okay? Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, this is a little bit of a magic trick. Most of the time I can get everybody to turn back into a human form.
Okay.
But I'm your parent, so I've signed your waiver. So we're okay if you come back and you have a leaf for an arm.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I gave you something in your hand. What did I give you? What is this?
A seed.
A seed, yeah. And where do green beans start from?
A seed.
A seed, exactly. So would you mind holding this in your hand? And what's one way that we can get a seed to start to grow?
Give it water.
Give it water, exactly, yeah. So it needs some water, and really important, it needs to stay nice and warm. So we're going to pretend that that's happened. Is there any way that you could turn your body into a seed, or what looks like a seed?
Yeah.
Thanks. And so Dylan, if you're a seed, and you can stay that way if you want, but once you're in your seed shape and you've started to get all the sun and the soil started to get warm and you're getting plenty of water, what's the first thing that's going to grow for you?
Root.
Oh, root, yeah. So why don't you stand right up so I can attach the roots onto your leg. So we've got here some roots, and what's the job of the roots?
To get water and secure the plant.
Yeah, do you ever drink smoothies?
Yeah.
Yeah, you love smoothies, right? So smoothies, they give you a lot of different vitamins and minerals, and there's some water in there, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Plants are taking all the vitamins and the minerals from the soil and the water, and they're soaking them up right through their roots, just like you do with your smoothie. And just like you said, it holds them up so that they can stay upright when the wind starts to blow. Cool.
And so they won't get ripped out of the ground.
And so they won't get ripped out of the ground. Absolutely. And so once we have our roots started to grow, what's the next thing that's going to grow on a plant?
Leaves.
Yeah, leaves. They're just going to start to poke out of the soil. Bonus question. So when I put this leaf on you, I want you to hold your arm right out. And bonus question, what is the first 2 leaves called on a plant? Arms out. Perfect. You know?
No.
That's okay. It's a really funny word. It's called cotyledon. I know.
Like candy?
Yeah, kind of like cotton candy. So they grow those first 2 leaves out, they take in the sun, and then they grow their true leaves. And their true leaves are the ones that start to look like their big leaves when they get big. Here nor there. So, what's the job of the leaves?
To get sunlight.
Yeah, to get sunlight. So it's kind of like, I always tell kids, it's kind of like a solar panel. Solar panels are taking in energy from the sun, and they're turning them into electricity that we can use in our buildings. And so this is very similar. It's taking in energy from the sun, and it's turning it into energy for our plant, right? So now we've got our leaves out, and what what's kind of cool about your plant is that when the sun is over here, guess where your body turns a little bit? Yeah, you lean, and then the sun kind of rotates this way, and the plants follow it. Super cool. Okay, next thing, green beans have a bit of a superpower. Do you like superheroes?
Yeah.
Love them, right? Do you like Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that's really cool about Spider-Man is he can reach really tall buildings, right? So, green beans grow these really cool tendrils, and they grow out of the green beans, kind of their leaves, stems, and they can attach themselves up really high. And one of the reasons why they want to do that is that then they can grow really tall, and they don't have to compete with things on the ground. And they'll save their seeds more because they're off the ground. They won't rot, so that's nice. So after you have your leaves and you've got your tendrils, you're starting to grow, what's next going to come up for a plant?
Flower.
A flower, exactly. So we're going to add in a flower here. Oh, cute. Photo op. And what's the job of a flower?
To grow fruit.
To grow fruit, right. But before they grow fruit, what do they need to bring in?
Sun.
Sun. They attract sun. They take it in. Who do they attract with the
Bees.
colors of their flowers? Yeah, bees. And what's the job of a bee?
To pollinate.
To pollinate. Do we have a bee anywhere? Come on in, bee. Welcome, bee. Can I get a bee noise? Bzzz. So, Mr. B, is this your first flower you were stopping at, or have you been to like 100 of them?
This is my, 50,000.
That's your 50,000th flower? Wow, you've been busy. So, B, Mr. B, what are you carrying around with you when you go from flower to flower?
Pollen.
Pollen, exactly. Mr. B, can you come out here? Can we sing a song together? Okay, you can do? All right, are we ready? On 3, let's sing it together. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3. I'm a honeybee, pollen baskets on my knees. Got a stinger on my back, so you're afraid of me. But I'd rather nectar, I'm an excellent collector. I'm a honeybee, buzz, buzz. Thanks, honeybee. We'll see you later. You got to go visit another 10,000 plants. All right, so then once the honeybee is collected, the pollen, the flower starts to shrivel up, and then guess what the plant does with all its energy it's taking in?
Grows fruit.
It grows its fruit. And what do we call this fruit?
Green beans.
Green beans. And do you know what the definition is of fruit?
Vegetable.
It's close to a vegetable. It's where does a fruit put its seed?
In the inside.
On the inside, exactly. So, can we get a round of applause here? We've got Dylan as our green bean. Nice job, Dylan. Thank you so much. All right, now we're going to turn you back. Can we do it? 1, 2, 3. Oh, it didn't work. Sorry, dude. Guess you got to stay that way.
All righty. So I just love showing that video. I think it's really well done. You don't necessarily have to go into the whole story. Clearly, the kids are a little bit older, but you can definitely build on it, right? And you can have the kids, either act out the different parts or you can dress them up. You could put it in your dramatic play area and let them dress each other. We could even try it with different types of plants. You could have a sunflower, you could have a bean plant, you could have a pumpkin plant, you could have a strawberry plant, and kind of think about all the different ways that plants grow. So fun little movement, dramatic play sort of video there. And I will say there are a couple other awesome videos on the Vermont Farm and School to Early Childhood Network. I will show a few of them in my next workshop because they have some fun ones about cooking with kids, but definitely well worth checking them out. All right, I'm gonna get this to advance. Come on. And my computer decides to be silly. There we go. All right, art in the garden. All right, so moving into the art area, the activity we did last time was planning our dream garden. That's a great place to start with your garden learning. Right around now in the January, February period with the kids, you can give them seed catalogs and let them cut and paste. You can just give them coloring materials, but letting them try to design what they would want a garden to look like. You can really use that as inspiration for what things you might want to plant or include in your garden. If you already have a garden growing or some plants, you can do a color search or a shape search. I am notorious for going to the local hardware store and getting a bunch of those little paint swatches, and then, giving different paint swatches to kids and letting them go around and see what colors can they find in the garden. Likewise, you can laminate some different shapes out of cardstock or colored paper and let them try to find the different shapes in the garden. So a really nice beginning, matching skill for the children. You can do observational drawings, which is, either give the kids clipboards or even just stiff cardboard with some paper stuck on it with like one of the little bulldog clips or the binder clips, and just, let them draw outside. It's something we don't often do. You can, if you have a garden, they can go and draw that, or you could even just bring in some fresh fruits and veggies or a bouquet of flowers or a house plant and let them draw what they see. We can do flower pressing, right? Where you take fresh leaves or fresh flowers, press them between materials. I have done this with children on either good stock paper or even fabric. And you can be a little creative with how they press them, right? You can press them in a book and leave them. Or if you're trying to get an impression of the natural dyes and colors in the plants, we've done it with giving the kids rolling pins, giving them wooden blocks, giving them toy trucks that they roll over it. And they literally just press down really hard on top of the paper with the flower underneath. And it can often make a print of the flower or the leaf. So that's a fun one to do. You can do nature circles, which is basically just natural loose parts play. I love to do it with leftover seeds at the end of the season. As you know, a lot of seeds, they go down in terms of their procreation abilities and their viability, how well they'll sprout. And so if I do have leftover seeds, I'll often save them. And instead of attempting to plant them or throw them away, I'll use them as loose parts and kids can build with them. So things like sunflower seeds and I'm trying to think what is beans and corn and peas and pumpkin seeds and zucchini seeds can be really fun for just making natural pictures that are temporary, and you can take a photograph and then you put them away and save them for another day. Sometimes I like to bring the fancier art materials out if they're going to be drawing what they see in the garden. So things like watercolors or oil pastels or colored pencils, make it feel a little bit more artsy with some more professional materials and kind of letting them have fun with that. And then likewise, as I said, with the sound deterrents, you can make anti-pest decorations. So in general, in my garden, I don't have to worry about pests because I have two very large male dogs that like to mark every corner of my garden. And that keeps away all the mammals, but it does not help with animals that do not have a good sense of smell. So last year I was in the middle of teaching a workshop on my computer, and I look out my window and I've got like 5 turkeys that are just parading through my freshly planted garden beds. And I realized I was going to have to come up with a better plan for keeping them out. And so with them, the smell is not going to work, but visual and auditory cues can help keep them away. So what I did was I got some tinsely material. It was like some kind of luau party, I don't know, something I got from the party store, and just strung string around the garden beds and hung those. And I didn't have the turkeys come in one more time because they don't like things that sparkle or twinkle or glitter or move. Old CDs work really well because they spin and they sparkle in the sun, but anything shiny, kind of ribbons and things like that. And then if you add in that sound element of like dangling keys or wind chimes or something that's going to rattle and make noises, all of these are really helpful for keeping some of those unwanted pests out of the garden. All right. So, thinking a little bit more in depth about those garden drawings, right? Whether it's an observational drawing, some of those fancier materials, if you bring something in, sometimes it helps to think about what is the actual purpose to this activity? What are the children actually gaining? And truthfully, it's so much more than just the hand-eye coordination and fine motor skills when they're drawing. So when a child is drawing in the garden, the first thing is they're learning to slow down. Just like those sit spots we were talking about that really have that sort of calming meditative effect on the children. It's a similar idea, is that the children are slowing down, and as a result, their bodies are calming down, right? They are recording what they're observing, right? They're building those observational skills because they really have to look and observe the different details of what they're drawing. And so by doing that, we're building observation skills, we're paying attention to detail, and we start to get to know the object better, right? How often have you found that like you actually take a good look at something that you've walked by dozens of times and you realize there's things about it that you never noticed before because you never really looked at it? So we have the ability to get to know an object better. And of course, when we get to know something better, we start to ask more questions. So now children, they're observing this item and they start to wonder, well, why does it look like that? What is this for? Why is it doing this? Why does it smell like that? Why does it feel like that? So you start to build some of that questioning. And then we also build our descriptive language, because the more we observe and get to know it, the more language we're going to be able to come up with to describe that object. And so in this simple act of drawing, beyond just the fine motor skills and the art and the hand-eye coordination, they're building language skills, they're building science skills, they're building math skills, talking about spatial awareness. So there's just a lot that happens just by taking the time to actually get to know an object. So I know the sun has gone down, so we're not going to necessarily sit outside right now. But as I sent in the prompt, try to find some kind of garden muse, whether it is a painting or a photograph that you have, or you can go into your refrigerator and find a fruit or a vegetable, or you can find a house plant, or you can look up a picture on your computer, whatever you need to do. But I want to give you, let's say, about 10 minutes to find something that is garden inspiring and take some time to draw or represent it in some way. So if you feel like an artistic kind of person and you want to try to draw it, beautiful. If you're someone who's really more comfortable with words, feel free to write some descriptive words, write a poem, write a story, be abstract. It doesn't have to look like or directly represent what you see, but I'd like to give you the time to really sit and get to know your object and see what comes out of that. So my clock is telling me it's just before 6:40. So I'm going to turn off my camera. I'll have Dinah pause the recording and we will come back together at 6:50. And hopefully you'll share in the chat a little bit about what you've done when I call us back together. So it's 6:50. Be ready to rejoin the conversation. And I can't wait to see what you come up with. I'm putting Narissa's riddle in the chat because I don't know if everyone can see it because she put it under, whoops, host and panelists. But here's her riddle. Let's see if anyone can solve it. Oh, Suzanne got it on the first guess. Very good. Right. If you are back, if you wouldn't mind just popping back in the chat, just so I know that the majority of the group is back. I don't want to get started before everyone else has come back. Excellent. Good. Looks like we have a bunch of people here. All right. I would love to hear from you all in the chat. Where did your observations take you? What did you decide to create other than a fabulous riddle about peas? So Dinah shared that she sketched out one of her garden plots. Excellent. What are you growing in your garden plot, ideally? Heather has shared that she did a drawing of garlic and squash. Now you're just making me hungry. Carolyn shares sketched a snowdrop and wrote some words around it. That's lovely. Can't wait for the snowdrops to start coming out. Kelly, I'm going to have to ask, what is a plant wheel? Drawing a plant for a plant wheel. Tina shares that she created a drawing of a rubber tree in the room with her. It's over 30 years old. Wow. And it's moved place to place with you. Very cool. Yeah, Kyria wrote that their flower bouquet that was given to you to the beginning of God's creation. Interesting. Your flower bouquet brought you to the beginning of God's creation. That's neat. Marianne sketched some dried flowers on the counter. Yeah, Heather, it really is important to draw what you observe, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be an observational drawing, but just the act of really getting to know the objects through observing it can bring a new understanding, really, of the object in front of you. Suzanne shares, drew some scallion roots to leaves. Nice. Claudia shares, decided to write a poem about spring bulbs based on the picture you took of them last year and how they made you feel. As springtime draws near, I begin searching the ground for an early bloom. Whether it be a crocus, a tulip, or a snowdrop, the smallest burst of color removes my winter gloom. That's beautiful, Claudia. Darshini says, rows and rows of mustard seed flowers swaying in the wind. It's colorful and reminds me of the coming spring weather. Mustard seed flowers. Interesting. Anita shares you did a drawing of your apple from different angles. My good side, top to stem or not to stem, fuzzy little bottom, and my bad side, bruised but not broken. That's really awesome, Anita. I love that. And I bet it was a very different experience observing those 4 different angles that you have there. Very neat. One of the things that I love about this is you see how different this was for everyone. And you didn't even really need a garden, right? None of us could go outside physically and look at a garden right now unless you really want to go out in pitch darkness and 20-degree weather. But we still found ways to do this kind of deep observation, and it inspired us all in so many different ways. Oh, so Kelly shares it's a wheel on paper with the months, and you're using it as a phonology wheel. Ooh, I'm definitely gonna have to check that link later. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole right now, but I'm gonna have to look more into that. Thank you for sharing, Kelly. Awesome. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. And it's really fun to do with kids, and you never know where it's going to take them. I will say, if you are going to do some observational drawings, you may want to share a special book, and I'm going to put the title in here along with the author, but it's called They All Saw a Cat. Oh, cat, sorry. Apparently I can't talk and write at the same time. And it's by Brendan Wenzel. And what I love about this book is that it's different artistic renditions of the same cat as observed by different animals. And it shows how differently the cat looks to different creatures. And I love to use this with children as an explanation for why sometimes the drawing you get isn't what you had in your mind or what you thought it should look like, and explaining that we all see things in different ways and we all represent them in different ways. And so it often helps to take some of that pressure off of children who are very literal and want it to look exactly like the object they're drawing, and it doesn't come out that way and they're feeling frustrated. This is a way to kind of show them that it's okay, because our eyes all see things in different ways from each other, and things can look many different ways. So They All Saw a Cat's a great book for this kind of activity. Excellent. So we'll go on back to, here we go. We did our museum share. Awesome. So moving into language and literacy in the garden. As my two 9-year-olds will tell you, I am a ginormous book nerd. I love children's books. I have way too many of them. My poor husband has to keep building me more bookshelves for them all. So this is one of my favorite topics. So where does language and literacy fit when it comes to our garden? So first and foremost, you can be working on the ABCs through the lens of your garden. So how can you take a walk around your garden and find different things that represent every letter of the garden? And this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a fruit or vegetable for every letter. It's just, can you find things in the garden that represent each of these letters? So, for example, A might be for aphid, and B might be for brown spots, and C might be for cucumber. Maybe it's stem, maybe it's dirt, whatever it might be. But seeing if you can, find the entire alphabet in your garden. For the truly ambitious, by all means, try and grow something for every letter of the garden. But I don't know how well quince grow around here, and that's pretty much the only Q I know. So it might not be the easiest route to go. You're also teaching language when you talk to children about the different parts of the plant. So they're learning different words like stem and root and leaf and branch. So there's a language piece there as you're learning to name all the different parts. You can get into the activity of I notice, I wonder. So this is both a very basic and a very diverse and enriching activity. I teach it with almost all of my workshops. The general idea is you present an object from nature or from the garden. And at first, children are only allowed to make observations. So telling you what they notice about the object, kind of carrying over from that art piece. So I notice it's round. It has a little wooden part sticking out of it. It has red and green stripes on it. It smells sweet. It feels smooth. It has bumps. If you really encourage the children to look deeply and keep giving you more observations, you're going to go from the very surface observations to some really interesting ones. So they're going to start with the obvious. It's round, it's red, it's smooth, right? But if you say, what else? Then you start to draw out some of the really interesting ones. So they might start to pull out, oh, like there's this really weird thing in the bottom that like has all these little points on it. Oh, well, that's, the flower where it, grew out of when it was pollinated. They're noticing the stem is, has a little dent in it. They're noticing that there's, a brown spot that looks like a hole and it's got a little bump over here. And why is that? So really encouraging them to make as many observations as they can and try to write them all down in a list. And then we move over to the I wonder, the question piece. What do we want to know about it? And I will tell you that the one question I do not accept is what is it? Because what is it doesn't necessarily matter. What else do we want to know about it? What's inside of it? How many seeds does it have? What does it taste like? What colors are inside? Would it float if I put it into water? What is, why is the stem this length instead of this? What is that little piece at the bottom with all the spiky parts? Who might have made that mark? Why does it have this? You want to try to get as many questions as you can. So in this activity, we're building our descriptive language. We are learning how to ask questions, and we can then take those observations and those questions and turn it into a science activity or turn it into a math activity. We can try and answer some of those I wonder questions, whether or not we ever find out what it is. But it's a really good way to inspire further learning while also developing some of those skills through observation, through our language development. On a different side, you can try to do creative writing, right? When you go into the garden and you see there's a hole in the dirt, how did that get there? Who made that? Why did they make it? Where does it go? Will they come out again? Right? Why is it this size? How many different entrances and exits are there? So encouraging kids to sit in the garden and take some inspiration, just like you did with, that observational drawing. It doesn't have to be a drawing. It could be a story, right? I want to know who's been eating this leaf. I want to know what's going to happen to this tomato when it falls off of this plant. I want to know where the sunflower seeds go after they're, maturing in the flower. So encouraging kids to use some of that creative writing ability to narrate, or if they want to try writing it themselves, a story that explains something in the garden. The food memory activity, that's something we did last time where, we did the drawings of our face. And then in the mouthpiece, you drew a picture of a special food memory that you have, something from your past, some special recipe. And then in the head part, you put some descriptive words or you tell a story about it. So that's another type of language and literacy activity. And then, of course, diving into my favorite topic, literature, right? There are so many books out there around gardening and growing. So when we're thinking about garden books, I think the first place our mind normally goes to is fruits and veggies and maybe flowers, right? That's where we typically go when we think of, oh, farming, oh, having a garden. But gardening and farming and growing is so much broader than that. There are so many more topics. So, topics you might want to consider gathering books about include that gardening and farming, as well as raising livestock, raising sheep for shearing, raising chickens for eggs, raising bees for honey. What are some of the other less traditional products when we normally think about? I don't even have in here, apples and orchards and vineyards and people who grow mushrooms, right? Or people that work in raising fish and like fishing farms, more or less, right? For food. So there are many different types of products. There's also a lot more diversity in terms of farmers, right? Who is growing the food? Where are they growing it? There are farms in the middle of the city. There are people of all colors and cultures and abilities and genders and all different identities that are farming, right? And so wanting to make sure that we are sharing books that show the true diversity of the farming and gardening world, right? Then there's a whole host of other books all about cooking, which a lot of times they're different kinds of foods that are relevant to different cultures. I know I found books out there that really resonate with me about various forms of Jewish cooking and Eastern European cooking and recipes that are familiar to me. A lot of the books are multi-generational, with a grandparent or an aunt or a parent or a cousin teaching recipes and cooking to the main character. Then there's also cooking for later, right? Doing things like canning and preserving and putting food away to save for another day. So that's another area of cooking that you may want to think about. Then, there's talking about the idea of farming and growing and fishing and harvesting and gathering as ways of reducing food insecurity. We can't really talk about food and where it comes from without also acknowledging that not everyone has enough, right? So, don't be afraid to talk about the fact that not everyone always has the food that they need to eat. And where does their food come from? And what are some ways that they find the food they need? What are some ways that we can be a part of a solution to ensure that everyone has enough good, healthy foods to eat? And then thinking about, on the other side of things, working with restricted eaters, children who are not comfortable trying a variety of different foods, as well as sometimes children have a hard time knowing how to react to foods that are unfamiliar to them and what it feels like growing up to be a child who's eating something that is different than other children. And how do we positively address that and build children's understanding and empathy and respect for different types of foods, as well as dietary practices, right? I grew up going to a Jewish school where everyone knew about keeping kosher. And then I went to camp and nobody understood why I couldn't have the s'mores and why I couldn't do the cookouts. And, it was a different experience for me. So understanding different types of dietary practices that might feel invisible to children, might feel othered, and trying to share and center that in a way so that every child feels reflected in the books that we are sharing. So here's what I would like us to do in the chat. I would love you to toss out the name of any book that falls within one of those categories that I mentioned or one that I didn't mention, some kind of farm-based book, whether it's about livestock or cooking or growing or eating or any of that, toss the name up in the chat. Share whether you like it or not. What is it you like about it? And if you have any idea of what kind of lesson might you do relating to that book or something you've already done. So an example of this for me, let's see. I might do Charlie Needs a Cloak, which is all about the whole process we go in from shearing and raising the sheep to making a cloak. I love the process that they show all of the stages. And then I might do an activity with my children where we work with yarn and make a pom pom, or maybe I would do something where I teach them a very basic loom because they show how to do looms, or maybe I'll do something with felting. So I will give you just a few minutes to toss some of those ideas up into the chat. I will also say I have a huge big book list, and that's one of the resources that I've shared with Dinah that will get sent out after this, and it breaks them down by subject matter. So things like working with selective eaters, working around culturally diverse foods, working around food insecurity. So I do have a big list to share with you after this. And yes, thank you, Dinah, for sharing in the chat some really great resources out there about people of color's perspectives in farming and the different ways that some of the books and some of the practices that are important to their culture that you're sharing in there. Thank you for that. Diane shares, From Peas to the Table was recently recommended to me, but I'm not sure I like the competition it inspires. Interesting, Diane. Yeah, I mean, not just because it's a book about farming doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the one that works best for you. I do have a book about Princess Penelope, who does not like eating peas. In this village where everybody eats peas, and she hides them and everything everywhere, and then accidentally winds up trying one and then deciding she loves them. And I agree, it's not necessarily my favorite version to express how to encourage eating vegetables. So not all of them are exactly the right fit. Anna shares a book called The Big Red Barn, and The Little Blue Truck talks about farming and animals. I know Little Blue Truck and Big Red Barn are very popular with like the toddlers, is a good fit for those. Kelly shares Up, Down, and Around, a good book talking about where the different fruits and vegetables grow, like underground. That is a really great one. And at the end, they have a lunch with all the foods that they grow. The Tiny Seed by Eric Carle talks a little bit about seed dispersal. That's a really neat one. Compost Stew, the different ingredients in compost. And Lydia, that's a great one if you want to actually start doing some composting with your kids, right? Thinking about the different ingredients you can add to make compost stew yourself. Eating the Alphabet. Yep, that's a great one to talk about the different fruits and vegetables that have different letters of the alphabet to start them. I love that one to show some of the diversity of plants out there. Oh, Anita, I don't think I know that one. Mama Provi's Pot of Rice, Stone Soup. I don't know No Jiwof Tumpri. All these books have endless possibilities, focusing on the classroom community and coming together to create a soup using vegetables and herbs from our different cultures. I love that cultural diversity piece in there, and we'll talk about that both with the cooking workshop and the community workshop. It's so important to find ways to really celebrate all the different flavors that we come together to share, right? That we come from many different places with different recipes. Let's see what else we got here. Apple Cake, A Gratitude by Dawn Casey, with beautiful illustrations, a way to talk about gratitude in the fall or any time of the year. They thank the bees, the rain, the sun, the apples, and the trees, and then make an apple cake. And that's the thing I love about these books. There's a recipe in the back, right? So some of these books have recipes. I have to say, I never in my life had made cherry empanadas. My daughter was obsessed with the book, My Singing Nana. And after that, she insisted on me making the recipe in the back for cherry empanadas. They're actually pretty good. So yes, sometimes there are, in the back, they have those recipes. And that's always a really fun way to encourage kids to try creating new things. Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, that's always fun. Tops and Bottoms, Suzanne, is one of my favorites. That's a really great one, about a rabbit who keeps outsmarting a bear based on which parts of the plants do we eat. So that's a great one for explaining sometimes we're eating the roots of plants, sometimes we're eating the leaves of plants, sometimes we're eating the fruit of them. And that is a really fun one to do. And then Blueberries for Sal is a classic. It's very sensory, right? All the different sounds. And that one also is canning, right? So thinking about preserving food, and that's the conversation, in New England, we can't grow food all year long. So how are we eating food during the times of year when we don't have access to fresh produce? And this is one way that we do it. Another really nice preserving story is Tomatoes for Neela. And that's actually written by Padma Lakshmi. Any of you fans of Top Chef? She was the former host of that. And it's about her experiences canning sauces with her daughter, fresh tomatoes and sauces that they then share with her mother when she comes from India to visit them. Claudia shares, which one? From Worms to Water Conservation. Yes, absolutely. Under your feet, soil, sand, and everything underground. That's a great one. So the book that Claudia is referencing is less of a storybook and more of a really fun teacher and child reference book. And so the ways in which I would use that as we're talking about different parts of the garden, I would read that page from the story and I would leave it in a place where kids could see it and ask questions about what they're seeing on it. So you're not going to sit down and read the whole book cover to cover, but there's so many different great pieces of information that you could tie in and that kids will be interested in. So that's a nice one to bring out and kind of engage the children in that. Something's Eating the Garden. I don't know that one, Sarah, but that sounds like fun. There's also In the Garden Who's Been Here, and it's mysteries. Every page is a mystery. They give you the clue, and then on the next page, you see who left the clue. So you're learning about the different animals that come and visit your garden. These are all great book suggestions. Loving it. And a few of them I'm going to have to add to my list because I don't think I have them on there. Awesome. Well, you continue to add some. I'm just going to put this up here. Again, don't feel like you have to take a photo of this. It is all in the book list I'm sending you. But I do really like to present a wide variety of book suggestions. So, keeping with the themes I mentioned earlier, gardening and beekeeping and livestock and wool. We talked about Tops and Bottoms. I actually really love The Bee Man. It's a nice intergenerational story that is the perfect blending of like a playful rhyme story that's going to keep the kids' interest, but still has a lot of information in it about bees and their society. And again, has a recipe in the back. Errol's Garden is an urban garden book, which I think is great. Children's responses to other foods. I think these are so important. And each of them looks at a different family, a different child, a different food, and how other people perceive those foods, whether it's a child who's feeling othered by the food that they're eating or growing. Lila's Lunchbox is about Ramadan and a child who's not bringing lunch to school during the holiday. Everybody Cooks Rice, and that whole series is about how one food is cooked in so many different ways by so many different cultures. And there's actually 4 books in that. It's bread, rice, soup, and I think beans maybe. But that's a really nice one as well. Here are some books about food insecurity, about harvesting and fishing to supplement, some food preserving books. There's that Tomatoes for Neela one that I recommended. Community cooking, so cooking with a whole community. Mama Panya's Pancakes is a beautiful one from Kenya, about how one family was going to make their own pancakes, and then this little boy keeps inviting more and more of their friends, and they all come together and bring more supplies. Dumpling Day, again, same food around the world made in different ways. Fry bread is about the indigenous fry bread that you make, and then some books about encouraging diverse eating as well. Excellent. All right, so shifting over to math. So especially in an Olympics year, but it doesn't have to be. I love doing Seed Olympics, which is where we're basically challenging our seeds and see who's going to be the best, the brightest, the fastest, the biggest, whatever it might be. And you can either do this with all the same type of seeds or different. I've had it where every child plants a different type of seed. I've had it where we're in teams and we're all, everyone planted, 4 beans, and we're trying to see which of the 4 beans grows the fastest. So then we start to, measure them and see which was the first to sprout, which one is growing at the fastest rate, who's going to be the tallest, who has the widest leaves, which is the first to have a flower, which is the first to have a fruit. I'll show you on the next page an example of an Olympics card that I made up. And I recommend, if you're going to do this, with your garden, that you do it multiple times a year, because the winners that you're going to have in June are going to be very different than the winners you have in September, because different plants are going to do their best growing and their best production at different times of year. So that's a really fun one to, revisit a few times throughout the growing season. I'm a big fan of square foot gardening. If that's something you're interested in, there is a book about that. Basically, it's because I'm not very good at knowing how much space each plant needs. And I have raised beds. So I literally mark off my raised beds in 1 foot increments. I use string. So that's basically a grid. And then using the measurement sheet in the book, which you can download online, it tells you, oh, well, in your 1 square foot, you can plant 16 carrots. You can plant 4 corn plants. You can plant like 9 beets, and it will show you the spacing. And so by doing this, it helps me to make sure I'm not overplanting or underplanting. But it also allows the kids to kind of think in grids and spaces and how do we plan out the garden. So it's very math based. Then as I'm planting my garden, I encourage the kids to help me make a map, because I'm not going to remember where I put a bunch of seeds. So they will draw on the map for me. They'll map out where is everything planted, so that when things start coming up, I'll know what's supposed to be where and who doesn't belong, right? So drawing those maps. When you're putting seeds into the ground, or seedlings or bulbs, there's math involved with how far apart do we put them and how much do we thin them. So for some of them, it's like, oh, 2-finger width apart. So that's how far apart they should be, or 4-finger width apart. So you're really kind of exploring, how do you space things and all of those measurements. Growing is all about sequencing, right? We're starting with the seed or the bulb or the eye, whatever it may be. And then you've got, the first root, the first leaves, then you've got, the plant, then you get the flower, and the flower gets pollinated, and then you get the fruit. And guess what? Inside the fruit is the next seed. So doing that kind of sequencing with the kids and getting those math skills in. And then of course you can do sorting. Sorting, I might, again, bring out those color swatches and have them sort things by the different colors they are, sorting from biggest to largest, sorting by the number of seeds that they have, or counting the number of beans or seeds inside the pods. And then anytime you cook, that's math there, right? Because there's measuring and sequencing involved in that. So lots of different ways that you can bring some of the math into the classroom. And it looks like we might have someone put something in the Q&A. Excellent. Lydia says in the Q&A, with Seed Olympics, do I have advice for how to present it so the kids see it as a competition between the plants, but not between them? Last year, some kids got very emotional if they planted and did not sprout as early or grow as tall as the other kids' plants. Great question, Lydia. So in that situation, I would say, put the plants against each other in terms of different varieties of plants rather than the individual seeds. So the class plants tomatoes and carrots and beans. So they're all responsible for everything that was planted. They won't necessarily know which one is their seed, but now we're going to see between the tomatoes, the beans, and the corn, who has the biggest leaves. Which of these is going to be the tallest? Which of these is the first produced? So there's no ownership over which seed I planted, because we all planted everything. Now it's just, of these 3 plants, who's going to be the fastest, right? So I think that would probably help with the Seed Olympics. And then as you'll see here, I'm going to flip to the next page, and you'll see that even some of these points on the Olympics are not necessarily all that competitive. Some of it's almost like a vote, right? So which one has the best smell? The kids might not all agree on that, right? I personally cannot stand the smell of lavender. Most people love it. I find it overwhelming, right? The best taste, right? My husband can't, when he tastes cilantro, it tastes like soap. So for him, that's not going to be the best taste. So some of this is going to be up to debate, right? But when you go through your garden, this garden you all planted together, and you bring your yardstick, it's not a debate about like which one's the tallest plant, because you're going to measure it and you're going to see which one's the tallest. And like, oh, of all of the plants that we planted, the one that grew the tallest, or the group that grew the tallest, were the corn plants. Oh, the most productive. Well, right now we have more beans than we could even possibly count. So that's going to be the most productive. We can count the number, which one has the most leaves, which one do we feel is the most colorful or appeals the most senses. So if you're planting the garden as a community, then the Garden Olympics really becomes the plants against each other rather than us against other students. Does that hopefully answer your questions there? And assume that that is good. All right. So anyway, this is my own version of Garden Olympics, but you can make your own, whatever you think the kids are going to be excited about. And that's just another way that you can kind of do this. And I do encourage the kids sometimes to try to draw the plant in here rather than me writing the words in, because I think that's kind of fun too. And I just have them laminated so I can literally just wipe them off and do them again the next time. Or each kid could have their own, or work in a small team and see what they come up with as their answers. So lots of different ways to do that. Awesome. Thanks, Diane. I'm glad that was helpful. All right. So moving into science. So I love science, in case you couldn't tell. So that's getting back to that I Notice, I Wonder game again. It's language and literacy, but it's also science. And I would take some of those questions that they ask and try to learn more about them, right? So I had a child who brought in the most bizarre looking vegetable I've ever seen. It kind of looked like, I can't even describe it. It was like a giant radish, but it was scalloped along the edges. It was like this big. It was bright pink. And the question we all wanted to know was, what does it look like on the inside? Well, that's an easy enough question to answer. So at circle time, I took a big old knife and we cut it. And boy, were we surprised, because when we opened it up, it had pink and white stripes inside of it, like literally like rings, like the rings of a tree, pink and white. Oh, it apparently is a candy stripe beet. I'd never seen one. I'd never heard of one, but we learned more about how to identify it by looking inside of it, right? They might want to know, what does it taste like, right? Or who would eat this, or where does this grow? So taking some of those I Notice, I Wonder questions and observations and turning some of them into science explorations and what would happen if, right? So that's a great way to start with some of that science. Thinking about plant partners, certain plants grow best together. I am, again, not an expert at plant partners. I know that many schools around here are inspired by the indigenous practice of the Three Sisters Gardens, and that's planting corn, beans, and squash together. The general idea being that the beans put nitrogen into the soil, the corn gives the beans something to climb up, and the squash's big leaves shade the soil and keep it from drying out. That being said, I am not very good at growing Three Sisters together. I do not have the magic touch, but I know that those plants grow well together. I do know that planting marigolds with my tomatoes help to keep the insects away. I do know that many pests of the garden do not like things that are smelly, like garlic and onions and chives. So planting those with some of the tastier plants may help to keep them away. I know that certain plants want to be covered and certain ones don't. So thinking about what kind of plants might work together and be helpful to each other is another interesting way to kind of bring some of that science component into it. And there are books out there that can help with that as well. Who knows? Dinah may have some good recommendations for things that go together as well, as does Mass Farm to School. But it's fun to kind of think a little bit about who wants to be together and who does not want to be together. Gardens are also an excellent space for doing bug hunts. And by bug hunts, I mean a bug safari. We're not trying to hunt and kill the bugs. We're looking them to learn more about them. Yes, you may find some insects that are pests in your garden. I have a massive infestation of Japanese beetles that come into my green beans. And yet, no matter how much they eat the leaves, they do not seem to impact my bean production at all. I grow more beans than I could ever possibly eat. I also have the fortune or misfortune of occasionally finding tomato hornworms. But the exciting thing is, every time I have found a tomato hornworm, it already has little white wasp larvae growing on it, which means that the white wasp has laid her eggs on it and they are devouring the tomato hornworm so that it can't hurt my garden. So I love doing bug hunts when I find bugs that are a pest that have already been dealt with by someone other than me. So yes, there are some very cool things you can find when you investigate your garden, relating to insects and other creepy crawlies. So that's a lot of fun to go out there with the kids and see what you can find. Having a discussion with the kids, what part of the plant are we eating? First of all, many children are confused by the fact that many of the things that we call vegetables are in fact the fruit of the plant when we use the definition that a fruit grows from a pollinated flower, right? A tomato, a cucumber, a zucchini, a pumpkin, a pepper, all of those are technically fruits because they grew out of a pollinated flower. Whereas when you eat a carrot, you're eating a root. When you're eating lettuce, you're eating a leaf. Try telling a kid that every time they eat broccoli or cauliflower, they are in fact eating a flower, right? When they're eating corn or peas, they're eating seeds. So it is fun to talk with children about what part of the plant are we actually eating. If you're eating celery, that's actually the stem of the plant, right? If you're eating garlic, that's a bulb. So that's a fun one. And we'll talk a little bit about that next week as well when we talk about cooking with the children. Then, when you're doing Seed Olympics, that's the math component. Predictions go really well with that too. So that's getting some of that science in where we predict who do we think is going to be the first to produce? Who do we think is going to be the tallest? Who do we think is going to be the most colorful? So getting some of that element in. Talking about pollination, which we'll do in just a minute, is a great way to get some science in there. As I said, a lot of children don't necessarily know that the fruit that we eat is because a flower got visited by a pollinator or pollinated in some other way, and that caused it to grow a fruit, which is also the plant's way of producing more seeds. And then just having discussions with children about what else is grown and raised on a farm, right? It's more than just, vegetables. It's more than just the fruit that we eat. Lots of other things that we eat are grown on farms. The wheat that we need for our bread is grown on a farm. The meat that we eat, the eggs that we eat, the dairy that we eat, lots of other things are coming to us from a farm. All right, so we are about to engage in, hold up. Carolyn has a question, a picture book recommendation for what parts of the plants we are eating. So one of the ones that works well for that is the tops or bottoms. It doesn't do a full explanation of what we are eating, but it does at least talk about what we're eating, what's the bottom of the plant, which is usually the underground part in this, so the roots. And then it has the top parts, which in the story is predominantly the fruits. And then it has in the middle, which was corn, the seeds. I have to think a little bit more about other ones that do a good example of that. But I will show a video next time, also by that Vermont Institute, that kind of shows a way to engage children in talking about the different parts. And I'll think and see if I've got another one that's a good example of that. All right, so the bee game. So there's a couple different versions of this, and you can scale it up or down based on the age and abilities of your children. So it works as well. It works really well with toddlers. You can scale it all the way up through second and third grade, depending on who you're working with and how you want to do it. So I'm sad to say, because we're doing this online, I can walk you through it, but it's not going to be nearly as much fun as actually doing this. I wish you could see what it looks like when teachers are playing this game because it's hilarious. But that's okay. We'll do the best we can. So in the first version of the bee game, so this is the one that works really well for younger children. You can do it inside or outside. Generally, what the children are going to learn is that bees pollinate by moving bits of pollen from one flower to another, and that's what enables a fruit to grow. And you add in the bee dance because bees communicate with each other where the flowers are by doing a bee dance, which is basically they shake their behinds, which everybody loves to do because it's a lot of fun. So in this version, what you're going to do is for the youngest children, do it as a follow the leader. For slightly older children, 3 to 5, you can make it a free for all. What they're going to do is the children and the teachers are all scout bees. Scout bees' jobs are to find the flowers and to visit them. They get a drink of nectar, they pick up some pollen, they let the other bees know where they are. So what they're going to do is the children are going to either watch the teacher, who will go to a flower, shake their little behinds because they found the flower and they're telling the other bees, come find me, I found a flower. And then you pick up a pom-pom from the flower. The way I do this is I have little laminated flowers, and then I have little plastic cups with pom-poms of one color in them. So I have some of the flowers have white pom-poms, Some of the flowers have orange pom-poms, maybe some of them have yellow pom-poms, but each cup is a single color. So the teacher picks up one pom-pom, does their little waggle dance, the children do the same, and then the teacher flies to another flower. When the teacher gets to the next flower, they shake their behinds again, right? They're doing the waggle dance. They put their pollen into the cup because that pollen had been stuck to them, but when they shook, the pollen fell off into the flower and they pick a new pom-pom. So they trade and all the kids follow suit. And in this way, the children and the teacher move from flower to flower, shaking their behinds, putting one piece of pollen in, taking another one out. So like I said, for the toddlers, they follow the teacher. For the preschoolers, they can all just visit their own flowers, but they wiggle their behinds and they trade the pom-pom. This is how they pollinate the flowers and tell the others where it is. When I have finished, I have all the kids come together and I show them the 4 cups or however many cups I have. Any cup that has more than one color of pollen in it or more than one color of pom-pom, we know the bees visited it, they pollinated it. This one is going to grow into a fruit or grow seeds. Any cup that has only one color, it didn't get pollinated by the bees, it will not grow a fruit or a seed. So it's a very visual way to show children what happens when pollination occurs and how you can tell what's going to happen next. All right, so version 2. So this, again, I might start it as early as 3. Definitely can do it with 4 and 5-year-olds. And then if you want to make it more complicated, you can give more jobs. So in this game, we're talking about how bees live in a community and different bees have different jobs in the hive. Not every bee is going to visit the flowers at one time. So in this, different children are going to get different jobs. So we'll still have the scout bees. They're the ones that are doing the same job as in version 1. They search the flowers, do their dance, and trade some pollen, right? Now you're going to have one queen bee. The queen bee's job is to stay wherever you've marked as the hive, and you're going to give them a bingo marker and a piece of paper, and they are going to stamp the bingo marker on the paper, and that's laying the eggs, right? Every stamp is an egg. So she just sits there and she stamps the piece of paper. Then you have the guard bees. This is my favorite. The guard bees stand to the entrance of the hive, wherever you've designated it, and any bee that tries to fly into the hive, the guard bees have to sniff them because they're the ones making sure any bee that comes in belongs to their hive and isn't some intruder. If you want to make this extra fun, I have done this with children. I make little paper headbands. I put pipe cleaners on the headbands with cotton balls at the end, and then I put different smells on the cotton balls. So I might put lemon juice. I might put vanilla. I might put cinnamon. And so the bees do actually sniff each other using their antennas, because that's how bees smell each other. And they sniff to see, are you part of my family or not? So you can get really high tech with this if you want. Other bee jobs, you might have nurse bees. They're in the hives and they're taking care of the baby bees, right? They're pretending to feed them. You have the drone bees. Drone bees can do whatever they like. They're the boy bees. They only have one job to mate with the queen. And other than that, they can do whatever they want. They can take a nap. They can fly around. They can have a snack. As you get to the upper grades, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, you can add in more of the jobs because there are bees that pack the pollen into the hives. There are the ones that fan the hive to keep it the right temperature. There are the ones that clean out the dead bees. There are the attendant bees that take care of the queen bee. There are the ones that actually build the honeycomb. So there's a lot of different jobs that you can put in there, as many as you like for the age of the children, but lots of different versions for this. Just a lot of fun ways that you can engage in this. So before I move on to the next one, I see Narissa has a question. Can we talk to children that plant is a living thing because plants need water, a living thing? Yes, absolutely. We should talk to kids about what do people need to survive? What do animals need to survive? And what do plants need to survive? Some of the things are the same. Some of the things are different. I love doing an experiment with the children where I make a list of all the things they think plants need to survive. And then we have the same kind of seed. And in each situation, one of them is missing one of those items. So if they think it needs sunlight, that one's going to go in the closet. If they think that it needs warmth, that one's going to go in the refrigerator or the freezer. If they think it needs water, one of them is not going to have water. If they think it needs air, I'm going to seal up a jar. My favorite was one of the times I did this, one of the children said that the seeds needed love. And so we had to think of how do we give love to one of the seeds? So one of the seeds, we told it that we loved it every day. which was very cute. But then we got to keep visiting the different seeds that we had started and see which one of these is doing well and which one is not. And I have to say, one of the things that surprised us is oftentimes the seed that was in the dark still did really well with sprouting. It might not have eventually continued to grow and get healthier, but it was often the first one to sprout. So that was surprising for the children. So we should definitely include in the conversations with children, how do we take care of plants? What do they need? What's the same about what they need and what's different? For example, they don't need food in the same way we do. They need sun and water so they can make their food. Yes, and Dinah, it is true that it's scientifically proven that speaking to plants helps them, right? All right, so now here's the really fun thing. So we've done these bee activities where children understand what the importance of pollination is and how it occurs. Now children can actually pollinate themselves. So here's what you do. You make a little bee out of paper or cardstock with a bee shape. The kids can decorate it. Then you take a regular Q-tip and tape it this way against the bee so that the two Q-tip parts come out around where the bee's knees would be, because that's actually where they have their pollen baskets. That's where the pollen gets stuck, is to their knees. So it sticks out. And then I recommend, if you can, do this with real flowers. I will say basic dandelions work really well for this. But if you don't have real flowers, you can either get some from the store, you can get a bouquet of flowers, or you can do this with fake flowers and then put some kind of powder on them, like cumin or saffron, something that they can see. And then have the kids go from flower to flower, stick the little Q-tips into the center of the flower and rub it around. And when they take it out, for many of those flowers, they will actually be able to see pollen on the Q-tips. Especially with the dandelions, you get some really noticeable yellow pollen. It doesn't work with all varieties, but it works with many. Then have them go to another flower and do the same thing, and they just pollinated that flower. So kids can actually go out and try pollinating a flower just like a bee does. Now tell them to do it 10,000 more times. And that's where they realize just how much work pollinators have to do to pollinate all the flowers. But it's really cool to think about, we can actually pollinate a flower. We can do the same job as the bees, which is really pretty cool when you think about it. All right, before I move on, any questions about pollination activities, games? How do we teach about this? I think we're feeling pretty good with the pollination piece. All righty. I will also say you can do pollination in the spring and summer, but I love to do it in the fall, because the fall is when the majority of the honey has been made. And that's actually when the beekeepers are going to collect the honey. So you can do it in the spring and the summer when bees are doing the pollinating. But if you want to talk about in the fall, you can talk about how we actually collect the honey. And as I mentioned in my last workshop, I have yet to meet a beekeeper that doesn't love talking to people about beekeeping. And so there are many, beekeepers that do this as a hobby that really love to come in and talk to kids and show them the tools that they use and talk about the process. So I strongly encourage, if you are planning to teach about pollination and bees, that you think about reaching out to a local beekeeper, and there are networks out there, to see if anyone would be willing to come in and talk with your students, because it's really neat, and you can see all the different pieces that they use, that they wear, and the tools that they use, and ask the questions about how they care for the bees and how they don't get stung. So that's a really fun community piece that you can tie in. All right, so a couple more activities for gross motor in the garden. So similar to like that garden yoga piece, having kids act out a seed sprouting. So I usually have them all curl up on the rug to pretend that they're a seed. And then I might come around and gently rub their back like I'm the sun warming the soil. And then I'm going to take my fingers, I'm going to pitter pat them on their back as if the rain is falling or somebody's using a watering can. And then they can slowly, slowly reach out their first root and slowly, slowly reach up their first sprout up towards the sky. And they can start to stand up and stretch and spread out their leaves. Maybe they grow a flower, maybe they grow a fruit, but it's fun. And then they shed their seeds and they can start growing again. So you can kind of go through the whole sequence with them of acting out the different pieces. The pollination games I just mentioned, obviously, is a lot of gross motor activity happening there. The garden yoga we talked about earlier. Seed tag is a kind of a silly little game that I created with my students once when they were bouncing off the walls, pretending that The kids start out as seeds that get distributed by the wind. So things like dandelions or milkweed, where they're all blowing around. That's the running part. If a farmer tags them, it's as if they've gotten planted. So like planted the seeds, the kids have to go into being seeds in the ground. They get to grow, spread, bloom. And then as soon as they bloomed, they can fly around because their seeds are loose again. So it's kind of like freeze tag, but they don't have to get unfrozen. All they have to do is grow and then they can disperse again. So that's a fun little one to do. Um, any kind of work in the garden basically is gross motor. You've got harvesting, preparing the garden beds in the springtime, weeding the beds, planting in the beds, putting the beds to rest in the fall, hauling water, composting. All of this is very active work. So if you're working in a garden in any capacity, odds are you're doing some gross motor. And it is an excellent opportunity to introduce the kids to different kinds of tools, right? How do we use a shovel or a trowel or a spade or a hoe or a rake? Some of them are the hand tools. Some of them are the kid size, but pretty big rakes and tools. And there's an important social and emotional piece here where we teach children safety rules about how are we going to use these tools. And then there's a gross motor piece of actually using them. So there's an opportunity for tool work, as well as the caring for the garden and how to be responsible. So I know one of the groups mentioned maple sugaring. Again, I wish this is one we could do together as a group because it is absolutely hilarious. I just did this with my Hebrew school children because we were talking about the birthday of the trees, which is coming up. So this is where you use the students to build an actual tree. You can do this with other parts of the plant. I like to do it with a tree. And I especially like to do sugar maples and talk about this time of year because it's relevant to maple tapping and what's happening in the trees right now. So this is a really fun activity that we're going to act out. And I do this as, an add-on process. So we start with the center and we add on pieces. And as we add on pieces, everyone is doing their individual job until we have the whole tree functioning together. So what we start with is the heartwood. So the heartwood is like the bones of the tree. It's what gives its tree its strength and helps it stand upright, but it's not a living part of the tree. It doesn't grow. So the heartwood, you're going to have one kid stand in the middle or two. They're going to show us their muscles and they say, I keep the tree strong, right? They keep the tree strong. So they're going to stand in the middle, show us their muscles, and that's their job. I keep the tree strong. We talk about how if a tree dies or if the heartwood rots, that's when trees fall over because it needs its bones to stand up. Then we have a couple kids hold hands in a circle around the heartwood. They're going to be the sapwood. The sapwood is the living part of the tree. It's basically like the circulatory system. It's where all of the fluids move up and down the tree. It's how the tree gets the sugar that's stored in the roots up into the branches where the buds are. It's also how it takes the sugar made in the leaves during the summertime down into the roots. It moves water up. It moves nutrients up and down. So the couple of children that are holding hands around the heartwood are going to hold hands together and they're going to squat down and say going down. And then they're going to stand up and say going up. So they're doing going down, going up. And the heartwood saying, I make the tree strong. So now we add the bark into the tree. So the bark is like the skin of the tree. It's what protects it from infection and help keeps the water and the other nutrients inside the tree. So a couple kids are now going to be marching around the outside of the sapwood. And as they march, they say, we protect the tree. We protect the tree. And the sapwood is going down, going up. And the heartwood says, I make the tree strong. So now we have 3 layers of the tree in the trunk. Now we're going to add the leaves. So however many kids as we need are going to stand on the outside of the bark. They're going to stick their arms up in the air and wave them around while they wiggle their fingers. And they say, we make the sugar. We make the sugar. So this is where you can talk about the differences between people and trees. We can't make our own food. We have to eat it. The trees make their own food. So think of the leaves as like the kitchen or the oven that's actually making food for the tree to eat. So they're waving their arms. We make the sugar. We make the sugar. The bark is marching around. We protect the tree. The sapwood's going down and going up. Heartwood makes the tree strong. And then whoever's left gets to sit on the ground. They're going to be the roots. The roots are kind of like the pantry. It's where the tree stores all of its extra food at the end of the fall. to save for later. And then when the tree starts to wake up, it's going to suck up that water. It's going to bring that sugar up, up, up into the branches, into the buds, and open up either new buds or new leaves. So those kids are going to be sitting on the ground going slurp, slurp, slurp. So when this is all going at once, you have kids going slurp, you have ones saying, we make the sugar, and you got the ones marching saying, we protect the tree. You got going down and going up with the sapwood. The heartwood makes the tree strong. It's very noisy. It's very silly. Everyone laughs. It's a great time. And it's taught the kids a lot about the different parts of a plant, how they all work together to support the plant, many ways that plants are similar to us, some ways that plants are different from us. And if you actually are doing maple sugaring and collecting sap, you can talk about how we take some of the sap from the tree. We make a little boo-boo in the bark of the tree. We only take a little bit of sap because the tree needs most of it to make its own leaves. And then we take that sugar that was stored in the roots that was made by the leaves. We boil that extra water out, and we're left behind with that special sugar that the tree made that we can eat. So it's a very fun, interactive, engaging activity that gets the kids up and moving and thinking about different parts of the tree. And I strongly recommend doing it right now because we're very close to maple sugaring season. All right, so just starting to wrap up here, things to keep in mind about other ideas, other things you can be doing with the children. As I said, maple sugaring right now, we are so lucky to live in the part of the world where we do maple sugaring. There are very few parts of the world where you can do maple sugaring. You need the right climate and the right weather conditions, the right types of trees, the right seasons. So this is a very special thing that is unique in many ways to New England and certain parts of the Midwest. You can talk to the children about honey and beekeeping and beeswax and all the different things that we get from bees. And keep in mind that beekeepers, not only are they raising bees for their own benefit, beekeepers will often loan out their bees to farms who need bees to come and pollinate their food. So the bees are being used for honey, they're being used for beeswax, and they are specifically being used to help with pollinating plants, right? You can talk to the kids about wool craft, things that we get from sheep. You can make either things with yarn and wool, or you can do felting, which is really fun. All you need is some warm soapy water and some wool, and you can do a lot of cool things with it. But don't forget to talk to the kids about other places where our clothing comes from, because a lot of it comes from different types of farms, right? Angora comes from rabbits. Cashmere comes from goats. Alpaca comes from alpaca. And they get haircuts. Hemp is a kind of plant. Cotton is a plant that is grown on farms, right? Flax, silk comes from silkworms, right? So most of the clothing we wear wasn't grown in a factory, wasn't created in the fabric. It was created on a farm and then processed, right, to become clothing. So that's a really important thing to talk about with kids. We can talk to them about grains and baking and oats and all the other things that we grow that we turn into various forms of baked goods. We can talk about meat and dairy and eggs. Mushrooms are grown on farms. Some fish are raised on farms. There's just a whole host of different things that we can get beyond fruits and vegetables that we want to make sure that the kids are thinking about. Again, these are some of the resources I shared last week, but ways that you can go and get some additional resources for your garden work. You can reach out to local greenhouses to see if they have any seeds or seedling donations, as well as many libraries do like seed exchanges. Sometimes in your local community, families will raise more seedlings than they need to plant, so they'll exchange seedlings with you. So if you have something you grew, they might share with you. You can reach out to certain hardware stores and lumber mills to see if they have any throwaway products that they will give to you either discounted or donated. I know some people have made garden beds out of pallets, old wood pallets. So that's a way to get some free lumber. Reaching out to agriculture students at local ag schools or tech schools, reaching out to local beekeepers, 4-H students, Eagle Scouts, grocery stores may have products that they can donate or time or projects. We got our garden beds were built by an Eagle Scout who took care of all of the fundraising to get the wood that he needed and the soil, and he built it for us, and it was amazing. Reaching out to local farms, farmers markets, grocery stores, they may have unused products. They may be willing to come and talk to your students about the work that they do. You could potentially do a field trip and see what it looks like and where the food is coming from. And then, of course, some of these amazing resources that you can check out online that have all kinds of activities and recipes and videos and tips and tricks and tools. Everything from Shelburne Farms, Island Grown Schools, Growing Minds. I am so sorry that Mass Farm to School is not on this one. It usually is. My apologies, Dinah. But all great resources that are out there. And then lastly, before I open it up to any remaining questions, wanted to let you know about various resources that Mass Audubon has. So we have a bunch of different early education series. This is our Children in the Garden series, all about gardening, but we have ones all about how to get kids out in nature, how to deal with different types of weather. We have an entire one just about water and the role it can fill in your curriculum, a whole series looking at the different developmental domains and how to do those in nature-based ways. So please do check out our website. We even have a few free ones coming up that you can look at. We also do customized professional training. So if your school has a particular curriculum model or topic you're interested in, we can work with you. We have our Nature Smart books. These are fun curricular books for young children to use. We have 2 that are ages 4 to 6, and they have puzzles and games and activities. And the best part is they have nature hero activities, which are things you can do with children that actually make a positive difference and help nature. We can do site visits where we come and visit your space. You talk to us about how you're currently using the spaces, what works well, what's challenging, and then we create for you a fully customized written plan of ways you can use what you already have to do more nature-based learning in your program or garden-based learning. We also do curriculum consulting and coaching where we can help you develop lessons. We can do demo lessons in the classroom. We can help teach you different ways that you can incorporate garden-based learning or nature-based learning into your classrooms. And then we have a couple of free resources. So definitely sign up for our quarterly early ed newsletter. I swear I only send it out 4 times a year, but I include some really fun curriculum ideas for the season. That's also where we put any place where we're going to be presenting in the field of early ed, where you might want to come in and join us and see the presentations. And then online, we've got some really awesome resources. We have 4 free STEM-based units available in English and Spanish for pre-K that you can just download off our website. That's the link right there, but I also sent it to Dinah to share out. We have Young Explorer pages, which are more curriculum ideas. We have nature bingo cards that you can print out seasonally and use with your kids. There's even some nature play videos that show you some different ideas. What does it actually look like when I take kids outside and do some playing with them? So here is my contact info. If you ever need to reach me, you can reach me via email. That's a quick QR code with just a very quick questionnaire that will give us information how we can better serve you and your interests as early educators. But with that, I'm going to open this up to any questions. It looks like Tina is sharing that her students love the nature bingo cards. So glad to hear that, Tina. Dinah's sharing the links for some of the webinars and her contact info. But I'll stick around for the next couple of minutes for anyone who has any questions. And otherwise, I hope we'll see you next week. Please make sure to look for the email because we're going to try to cook together virtually. This should be exciting. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that you see the email of what materials to have on hand. I swear it's very, very simple, but you're going to want to know what you need ahead of time. So please do check your emails next week so you know how to be prepared for the workshop. And I hope you all had a great time and hoping to see you all at our next 2 workshops.